We're finally ready to begin assembly of our Phoenix 215 quadcopter. You've probably noticed that there are no instructions that came with any of your parts, really. So this is the whole purpose of this course, to make it easier for you. I hope you printed out our form that is listed on this lesson page. We're going to be using this to help create our quadcopter. You'll notice everything here is to size. We have our top plate, our bottom smaller plate, and our arms. Now the arms are kind of interesting. I want to bring your attention to these red squiggly lines. They're puzzle pieces, and this helps us put our puzzle together. I also want to draw your attention to the color codes: blue, yellow, and red. The blue screws, nuts, and standoffs go where they're indicated in blue, and that's to help support our stack of electronics. The yellow helps connect all of our arms together, and we'll be going through that in a few moments. And the reds are for our aluminum standoffs that go on the large top plate to help support the entire frame. So let's start with the arms. And if you look at the arms, you'll notice we have these wiggly puzzle-like pieces. And if you line it up to the form, you will find that there's a way that they go together. There's a right way and a wrong way. And the nice thing about this is it adds rigidity to the frame. Now, it may take a few moments for you to figure out which goes where. I certainly was confused the first time I did this. And there we go. And when you're done, it should fit the form exactly. Oh, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. There we go. There we go. Nope. Even I have trouble right here in River City. There we go. Now we have it together. And this is important because we're going to use this bottom plate that sneaks under this and the top plate that goes over it, and all these holes align with their color coding. So let's begin. And to begin, we're going to start with the blue bolts, the 14-inch. You may have noticed this. This is an ice cube tray, but it's special in that I've used it for all my parts. You may have noticed I've labeled the bins to help you recognize the parts. We're going to begin our assembly using the 14mm bolts and the 4 nylon nuts. They're going to go into the blue holes. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to start with our bottom plate and put the screws into those 4 holes. Be careful that they are the correct 4 holes. They should form a square box, just like they do here. Now once we have those, flip it upside down with your fingers underneath it and lay it down on the sheet. Pull the arms aside and we can put it right there in place. Now take the arms and put them right on those bolts in the appropriate holes. And you'll notice the puzzle pieces start to hold them in place. And that's part of the beauty of this design. Isn't that cool? It just held it right in place. We're now going to take our top plate and place it over the bolts. You'll notice we have a cutout here and a cutout here, and the placement of these shapes. Line them up, and those screws should go right in there. Just like that. Take the 4 nylon nuts and finger tight them down. When we're done with this part of the lesson, we're going to have the basic frame being held in place. Have your 2mm hex driver ready, because it's very easy to just give it a twist down. Okay, now this is starting to hold in place, but you'll see it's still a little shaky. One thing very important I want to point out is this. You'll notice we have about 4 millimeters of thread sticking out over the nylon nut, maybe 3/16 of an inch more or less. That's important, and you should have that on all 4 of the bolts that you put in. If, for example, you don't see that clearance of thread, then you put the wrong bolt in and you should change it out, find the 14 millimeter bolt and replace that. For the next step, you're going to need your 2 millimeter hex driver, and we're going to use that to put in the yellow bolts with the lock nuts. Now there are 12 of these, and one thing that's very important that I want to point out, I've made this mistake, I don't want you to either. You'll notice how the bolts are going from the bottom up here. In this case, we're going to go from the top down. So you want to have that bolt going, wiggle it if you need to, going down. Nut side on the inside, bolt's head on the top. You want on the bottom side the thread coming through. So for right now, take all of the 12 millimeter bolts and put them in. They form a triangle around the arms. One of the beauties of this design is you may break an arm. And if you were to break an arm, you simply take out 4 bolts and put in a new arm and move your motor and ESC over, and this thing is good as new again, and you will keep on flying. Here's a quick tip. Make sure you put all the 12 millimeter bolts in by looking at the underside and making sure that all those threads are about the same length down. Now that you've had that, here's where we need 2 tools that make our life easier. The 2 millimeter hex driver and the 5.5 millimeter wrench with the closed end. You'll notice this lock nut. It has a thinner top side that's round and a square hex side that's on the bottom. You want that flat hex side on the bolt. Begin screwing it down. Then take the 5.5 millimeter wrench, place it over the nut, and continue to turn till it's down. But don't do it all the way down until you get all the nuts and bolts tightened down. When they're all finger tight, then tighten them all the way down. 12 bolts is a lot of tightening, but here's the thing, this is going to be so secure when you're done. This is one of the reasons why I had picked this frame for you, is because it is easily repairable and super strong. And it will take a lot of abuse. And let's face it, new pilots break their drones a lot. My first drone lasted about a few hours. And it was a inexpensive Chinese kit that was of not the best quality. This is a premium kit, and you are going to have much more success with it, I'm confident. It doesn't matter the sequence of nuts and bolts that you screw in, just that you get them all in. Take your time. All right, we got them all in. Appears that we've got them all in. Now, there should be a little bit of jiggle, not much. Now, tighten them all down good. Tighten them all down nice and tight. We are not going to be disassembling this unless you have a crash, in which case you will have to replace an arm. Barring that, this is done. Tighten it all tight. Remember, this is going to hit the ground. This is going to be vibrating, and that's the reason for the lock washer, is to keep the arms secure. Much better than using Loctite, which we will use later, and we'll talk about that at the appropriate time. So just lock down all those screws good and tight now. I think it's a good idea to just like changing a tire. You get them all kind of snug, and then you lock them all down. That way you don't have anything that might be slightly off center. If I were to use needle nose pliers as opposed to this tool here, I could do it, but it would be a lot harder, and I'll probably have nice scratches on something because it's a less exacting tool. Okay, I think we're done here. That is really quite rigid now. It is not going anywhere. That's a solid frame. And if you do feel any play, then just go back to those screws and give it some more twists down, because you don't want things shifting in time. By the way, it's important to note that it is not unusual for bolts to come loose on a quadcopter after some use, because things change, you know. Heat expands things, vibrations loosen things. So you want to do the best job you can to make sure that things are nice and snug, and check them every now and then, even after you've been flying for a while, to make sure that nothing has come loose. I have in fact lost bolts because I didn't know. When you're done at this point, it should look just like this. This is the bottom of your quad, and you have the bolt heads for the standoffs facing upward, and you have the lock nuts for the arms facing downward. I'm going to flip it over now. This is the inside. You'll see on the inside we have the screw mounts for the stack here, and the heads facing downward. Now we're going to work on our standoffs, so we want to make sure we're not missing anything. So we want to make sure we have all of our red standoffs and all of our 6mm bolts. So we're going to do a dry build of that. Now again, remember, these little bolts go towards the inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, again, our 2mm driver and put it in the bottom there, and start putting in our standoff. Again, they should be facing up, just like the threaded screw right there. So continue to take all of these bolts, and just, it doesn't matter what order you do them. Again, we're just making sure that the thread is good and nothing is missing. Remember, all these parts come from China, and the quality control can be questionable at times. Though Quad Monsters does use better quality parts, I think in general it's a good idea always to do a dry assembly and make sure the threads are good on all the parts. There's nothing more frustrating than doing a build and find out you have a bad part. Better you find out before you get really deep into the build. I wish this was more exciting, but it isn't. But if you're geeky like me, it's a hell of a lot of fun. Maybe not for everyone, but it is for me. There are a lot of these screws. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 standoffs. Not all quads have 8, but this one was designed with 8. So far we're doing well. Nothing is missing. and all the threads appear to be perfect. Again, don't make this tight. We are only going to leave it here temporarily to make sure that all the parts are good. And again, this is what it should look like with everything facing the same direction. The threads for the stack and the standoffs. Now that we've got this, let's try the camera mount. Let's make sure that this works fine. You should have two pieces that look just like this. These are the camera mounts. And I want to point out this right here. You see these nubs on top? We have a nub here and a nub here, a nub here and a nub here. What these do is they go into these slots right here. There's 4 of them. So if we slide that in there, it clicks right in. We take this one and it clicks right in there. Now when we take our top plate, by the way, you notice the little initial here, QM, Quad Monster. Don't do this because then you've dyslexed it. Do it this way and you'll see that little opening right there. That tells you it's the front. And that opening is for the camera. We have the slits there as well. So just slide them around until the slits all go in. There they go. Now that you've got that, you'll notice it still wiggles a bit. So this is why I recommend you continue taking the 6mm bolts and start right here. Because once you start right there, it helps lock in that wiggle so the camera standoffs don't fall out. If you were to start back here, you might still have some wiggle and you might have to undo and redo the screws to get those pieces of the camera mount back in the slots. And again, we're putting these in just finger tight because we want to make sure the threads are good. I find it easiest to take my hex driver and put the bolt head on there first. Then screw it in. That way things don't fall on the floor so easily. Congratulations! You've just built your first quadcopter airframe, the Phoenix 215. Now we have to do some disassembly so we can install our components on this. So to do that, we need to remove the 6mm screws, which we put on finger tight. And again, we're going to put it back into the compartment in our ice cube tray. It's important that we do not lose these pieces because that will delay us. This will delay you, not me. This will delay you in building your quadcopter if you need to get more parts. By the way, a nice nifty thing is this. This is a magnetic parts tray. And the nice thing about it is if you're afraid of losing parts on the floor, you can just drop them in there and they just stick. Now, this is for metal parts. And if you have this, you're not going to lose things. Except your screwdriver from time to time. That's why I should have my glasses on when I screw and unscrew. Okay, take your top frame, put it in a safe place. You got to take out your camera mounts too. Put them in a safe place. I have a box that I put my pieces in. Okay, now we need to take off our aluminum. Did you see that? I'm going to do that again. I'm going to take off this aluminum and I'm going to take off the 6mm screw. Did you notice what just happened? Aluminum is not magnetic. The screws stay in, but the aluminum doesn't. So let's put those back in our ice cube tray. So yeah, I know it isn't very exciting, but this is all part of it. The reason we need to take this off is because we can't really build anything with these standoffs in the way. We will be putting them in much later in the process after we have put in our propulsion system and our radio systems. and a number of other things, and even some of the video systems. You can put the aluminum there, but just be careful. They can bounce off. Okay. So again, I'm going to put all my pieces in their appropriate place. And now what we have is our completed base of our airframe. We are going to be building everything on this like a chassis of a late model car. And I will see you when we build our power system group on this in the next lesson.